The desert sleeps beneath a canopy of endless stars. It is not the restless kind of sleep we know, with shifting dreams and sudden awakenings. It is the sleep of something ancient, steady, unmoving, and utterly certain of its own eternity. From the crest of a dune, the world appears stripped down to the bare elements, sand, sky, and the soft pull of gravity. The air is cool, almost tender, carrying the faint scent of stone, warmed by a sun now hidden far below the horizon. No bird calls, no leaves rustle. The silence is so deep, it feels alive, as if the desert itself is listening. It is here, in this quiet ocean of dunes, that a legend has endured for centuries, a city vanished from all maps, and absent from all official histories, yet whispered about by those who have wandered too far under a moonless sky. The city is said to be unlike any other. Its walls shimmer, as if stitched with threads of gold, and its towers catch light in a way no natural rock should. But here is the strangeness that turns curiosity into obsession. This glow comes only once each year, for a few precious minutes, before fading back into the sand, as though it were never there. The nomads speak of it in low voices, as if to name it too loudly might wake it. Caravans have altered their routes to avoid it, fearing a curse. Others have sought it out deliberately, driven by dreams of riches, spiritual revelation, or the thrill of standing in a place where reality itself feels thin, a place where the earth seems to remember something we have forgotten. But the desert guards its mysteries well. The few who claim to have seen the city describe it differently, its size, its location, even its color, shifting from one account to another. Some swear they walked among its streets, their feet sinking slightly into sand-polished stone. Others insist it is only an apparition, a trick of light born from heat and distance. The contradictions do nothing to weaken the story. If anything, they strengthen it, because in mysteries like this, certainty is the enemy. It is the uncertainty that keeps the heart awake. Tonight, the desert is waiting. The moon rides low, its pale light scattered thinly over the dunes. A breeze curls along the ridge, carrying grains of sand that hiss against the surface of your tent. Somewhere far off, a camel grunts in its sleep. You imagine the hundreds, perhaps thousands of nights exactly like this that have passed over this place, and yet, among them, there is one night each year, when the horizon changes, when a flicker appears where there was only shadow. A flicker that grows, not into the firelight of some distant camp, but into the steady, impossible glow of a city reborn from sand. What could make stone shine? Was it built with materials unknown to us? Was it coated in metals that catch some precise angle of the sun, even long after sunset? Or is it something less material, an echo, a memory projected into our world by forces we do not yet understand? For centuries, travelers have tried to time their journeys to this singular night. Some arrived too early, and left in disappointment. Some arrived too late, and found nothing but the bare wind waiting for them. And then there are the rare few who claim to have been there at the right moment. Their voices grow hushed when they speak of it, not because they are afraid, but because they are unwilling to share it too casually. The city, they say, is not a thing to be owned, it is a thing to be witnessed. As the first hour of night deepens, the stars sharpen overhead. They look close enough to touch, but their cold light feels indifferent to the small human drama unfolding below. Somewhere in the darkness, a ridge of dunes forms a jagged horizon line. Somewhere beyond it, or perhaps nowhere beyond it, the city waits. You are not the first to seek it. You will not be the last. Stories of the glowing city have found their way into maps, poems, and half-forgotten letters. In the markets of distant towns, merchants still trade in fragments of glazed pottery said to be taken from its streets. In temples, priests light candles on the night they believe the glow will return, whispering prayers in languages older than the faiths they serve. The city has no agreed name, but in every tongue it is given the same epithet, the one that returns. But what returns? The stones themselves, or only the vision of them? And if it is only a vision, does that make it less real, or more? The wind changes direction, pressing cool air against your face. In the distance, something seems to shift, a subtle rearrangement of shadow and line. You blink, but the horizon remains still. You know the city will not come simply because you are watching. It has its own rhythm and its own reasons. Your task is only to be here when it decides to show itself again. As we begin this journey through the fragments of history, rumor and science that make up the legend of the desert city, we will move slowly, like the dunes themselves, letting each layer settle before brushing it aside to reveal another. We will step between the known and the unknown, the visible and the invisible, and if we are lucky, perhaps by the time the final words are spoken, the horizon will have begun to glow. For now though, we are still in the dark, waiting, listening. The city, if it is real, is still asleep. In the desert, stories travel faster than caravans. They move not on camelback or by wagon, but in the warm air that drifts between campfires at night. They cling to the breath of storytellers, passed from elder to youth, as easily as the smoke that curls upward into the black sky. Long before maps claimed to know the shapes of continents, the people of these sands knew a different geography, one not drawn in lines and borders, but in remembered paths, sacred wells, and dangerous places, best left alone. Among these mental maps was a location that no compass could fix, the city that shines. It was not always spoken of as a city. Some clans described it as a cluster of towers made of salt, glistening under a hidden moon. Others imagined it as a citadel of polished stone, with walls so bright they were painful to look at. The oldest tales never called it by name, as though to do so might bind the speaker to its fate. Instead, they referred to it with phrases: the golden place, the horizon fire, the city that wakes once a year. Nomadic life leaves little room for permanence. The desert teaches that nothing stands still, not the sand, not the wind, not even the stars. Yet, curiously, the legend of the shining city seemed to break that rule. It spoke of something fixed and unchanging, revealed only for a heartbeat each year before disappearing again, without trace. For people accustomed to transience, the idea of such permanence was both unsettling and magnetic. By the glow of oil lamps, elders told their children of journeys when the city had appeared, distant yet clear, shimmering under an alien light. Some stories ended there, with the city fading before the travelers could approach. Others continued into stranger territory, narratives in which those who reached the city returned, changed, their hair streaked with silver, their eyes holding a glint as if they had brought a piece of the city's light back with them. But not all tales were hopeful. Some were warnings. A mother might whisper to her son, "If you see the golden towers, turn away, for they are not meant for us." In these darker versions, the city was a trap, its glow a lure meant to draw wanderers from the safety of their caravan, leading them into a place from which they would never return. These variations didn't dilute the legend, they fed it. Each telling was a new thread woven into the fabric of belief, and over generations, the fabric became rich and dense. The more contradictions there were, the more alive the story felt, as though the truth itself was shifting under the listener's feet. Nomadic tribes are the keepers of what history forgets. Without permanent archives, their past is stored in song, in poetry, in the rise and fall of the human voice. The desert is a cruel editor, burying bones, bleaching cloth, erasing the outlines of once proud cities. But in stories, nothing ever truly disappears. The shining city might have been a mirage, or a memory, or an invention, but the nomads carried it forward as though it were as real as the next oasis. Travelers passing through the desert often found themselves drawn into these fireside circles, listening to the elders' voices crack and fade into the wind. An Italian merchant once recorded in his journal, "I have heard of a place that exists for an hour each year. The Bedou call it the City of Gold. I believe it to be some reflection of the sun upon the sands, but they speak of it as one might speak of God." His words, though dismissive, captured something essential, the reverence in the telling. the quiet conviction that the city was not simply a trick of light, but a place with intention. For the tribes themselves, the legend became a marker of time. The night of the glow was not fixed to a calendar, but to the rhythms of sky and sand. Some clans believed it came after the third moon of spring, others swore it appeared only when the winds shifted from the east to the south, carrying the scent of salt from a distant sea. In any case, it became an annual point of anticipation, part ritual, part test of patience. The anticipation itself was part of the story. Children grew up hearing that their grandparents had once seen the city. These same children would grow old without ever laying eyes on it, yet they would tell the tale to their own grandchildren, as if the sighting had been their own. In this way, the city existed more fully in memory than in reality, and perhaps that was the secret. Perhaps the city's true power lay not in stone or gold, but in its ability to inhabit the imagination of a people who had learned to survive without walls, without monuments. For the nomads, to believe in the shining city was to carry a fixed point in a world where everything else moved. It was a compass of the mind. From the outside, it is tempting to think of such stories as quaint or primitive, evidence of how human beings cling to myths in the absence of scientific explanation. But listen closely, and you will hear something else, a coded memory of migration routes, celestial patterns, and the subtle signs of water beneath the sand. Legends often double as survival manuals. It is possible that the city, whether real or imagined, was tied to a place where resources briefly became visible, a momentary oasis revealed by seasonal floods or shifts in the dunes. The light could have been the sun catching mineral deposits, the glow a signal to those who knew when to look, and yet, even when the practical explanations are laid out, something in the tone of the nomads' voices resists them. Theirs is not the voice of people describing an optical illusion, it is the voice of people recalling a visitation. The fires burn low, shadows stretch long across the sand. The storyteller pauses, letting the silence press against the edges of the tale. In that pause is the invitation to believe, even for a moment, that the desert is not empty, that somewhere beyond the dark ridges, the city is waiting for its single night to shine. From here the story begins to move outward, away from the shifting circles of oral tradition and into the written accounts of those who first tried to find the city. The torch will pass from the nomad's memory to the ink of early explorers, whose compasses and maps could never quite catch the flicker in the sand. The first seekers were not born in the desert. They came from the coasts, from the river kingdoms, from cities where the sky was sliced into narrow ribbons by towers of stone and wood. They were merchants, wanderers, soldiers, without a war, scholars chasing curiosities. They had no language to explain. To them the desert was not home. It was an obstacle, a vast and hostile sea without water. And yet, they came. Their arrival was never quiet. The nomads would hear them days before they appeared. Creaking wagons, jangling harness bells, the clipped voices of men, unused to the patience of sand. They brought barrels of water sealed with wax, crates of salted meat, rolls of cloth, to shield their skin from the sun. They also brought books, leather-bound journals, compasses in brass cases, and maps inked with confidence that would not survive the shifting dunes. These were the first to write of the shining city in languages meant to endure: Greek, Persian, Arabic, later Latin and Italian. They recorded not just what they had heard, but what they hoped to find: treasures left by a forgotten empire, technologies beyond their own, proof of a civilization swallowed whole, and yet still breathing in some strange way. One of the earliest surviving accounts comes from a man called Hecaterios of Rhodes, a sailor who turned inland after a storm wrecked his ship on an unfamiliar shore. In his surviving fragments, preserved by a monastery centuries later, he speaks of a city that casts its own dawn. He admits he did not see it himself, but that men of the sand spoke of it in terms that made him believe. He writes, "They speak as one speaks of a place they have touched. They say its walls are warm, even in the cold night, as though lit from within." That warmth, whether imagined or not, became a detail future seekers would repeat. Some took it as proof of strange construction. Perhaps the walls were of some heat-trapping stone, or some alloy unknown to their own lands. Others took it as metaphor, a city alive, breathing in the desert. The first expeditions were small, handfuls of men with a few camels or mules, guided by locals who may or may not have believed the stories themselves. They would set out under stars, timing their travel to the cooler hours, their eyes fixed on the distant horizon. But the desert is not generous to strangers. Many turned back within days, undone by heat, thirst, or the slow erosion of morale that comes when nothing changes in the landscape except the pattern of the wind. Those who pressed on sometimes returned with strange accounts. A trader from Damascus claimed that after 3 weeks of travel, he saw shapes of light upon the sand, like tall ships at anchor. He approached, but the shapes dissolved before him, leaving only the sound of the wind. Another spoke of a faint glow that seemed to move with him, always just beyond the next ridge. These reports were impossible to verify, but they began to stack like bricks, forming a wall of suggestion. The city was out there, if only one could be clever enough, patient enough, lucky enough. But for every hopeful report, there were warnings. In the archives of Alexandria, before they burned, there was said to be a scroll from a Persian explorer named Farrukh, who spoke of losing 3 companions to the mirage that breathes. He wrote that the light had a pull to it, as if it were not only seen but felt, a pressure behind the eyes, urging him forward even as his water ran low. He turned back, but the 3 who continued did not return. These stories reached the ears of rulers, and the shining city began to tempt not only the curious, but the ambitious. A sultan in the 12th century offered a reward for any man who could bring him a stone from its walls. His emissaries returned empty-handed, their caravan reduced by half. They spoke of sandstorms that rose without warning, erasing the path behind them and swallowing the stars overhead. The city, they said, did not wish to be found. Still, the promise was too alluring. By the 14th century, larger expeditions set out, dozens of men, armed and provisioned for months. They carried intricate astrolabes, water skins lined with silver to keep them cool, and flags to mark their progress in the endless sameness. One such expedition, led by the Portuguese navigator Álvaro Mendes, left behind a remarkable logbook. In it, Mendes described a night when the horizon trembled with gold. His men shouted, pointing toward a cluster of lights. They advanced for hours, but the lights never drew closer. At dawn there was nothing. Mendes wrote in his final entry, "We have seen the ghost of a city, and like a ghost, it has fled from the living." It was during these centuries that the legend began to crystallize in the wider world, not as a curiosity of the desert, but as a true lost city, equal in mystery to Atlantis or El Dorado. Artists in distant capitals painted it as a city of domes and spires, with fountains that ran not with water, but with molten gold. Poets used it as a metaphor for unattainable beauty. Scholars debated its possible origins, linking it to vanished trade empires, or to the biblical Ophir, the land of gold. The city's light, once a local legend, had become a beacon in the minds of people who had never set foot in the desert, and yet, the closer the seekers came to the source, the more the desert fought back. Maps drawn by one expedition would be useless to the next. Dunes had shifted, landmarks had been swallowed. The city's location seemed to move, as if it were not fixed to the earth, but carried on the wind like a drifting ember. By the dawn of the 17th century, the legend had outlived most of those who had chased it. Some still believed it would one day be found, and when it was, it would rewrite history. Others began to suspect that its power lay precisely in its elusiveness, that the city survived because it could not be possessed. It is from this point in history that the tale takes an unexpected turn. In a dim monastery archive, far from the sands, a map was found, drawn in delicate lines of ink, with one feature unlike any other, a small circle marked in gold. It would become known as the cartographer's secret, and for the first time, the legend of the shining city would have a place on paper. It was found in a place that should have had nothing to do with the desert at all, a monastery perched on a green hillside, where rain fell often, and the nearest dune was more than 1,000 miles away. The air smelled of pine resin, not dust. The only sand here lay at the bottom of hourglasses in the library, marking the time monks spent in silent study. The map was discovered by accident. A young monk, tasked with repairing the spine of a crumbling folio, pried apart 2 boards of oak and found a narrow packet tucked inside the binding. It was wrapped in linen, so thin it had become almost translucent, and tied with a faded thread that fell apart at his touch. Inside lay a single sheet of vellum, no larger than the width of his outstretched arms, its edges browned with age and curled like dry leaves. At first glance, it appeared to be nothing remarkable. It showed the coastlines of a familiar sea, the mouths of certain rivers, a scatter of settlements rendered in neat, dark lines, but in the lower right quadrant, there was something that did not belong, a patch of pale emptiness where the desert should have been. And in that emptiness, a circle no bigger than a coin, drawn not in ink, but in some pigment that caught the candlelight. Gold, not the dull ochre tone used by map makers to embellish borders or highlight kingdoms. This was different. A thin layer of metal, ground to dust, then painted on so delicately it seemed to drink the light rather than reflect it. The longer one looked, the more it seemed to give off its own faint glow, as though some memory of the sun still lingered in the pigment. There were no words beside the circle, no legend, no name, only a faint mark at its center, shaped like a starburst, 12 rays spreading outward. To any ordinary traveler, it would mean nothing. But to those who had heard the stories, it could mean only one thing. The monastery's records gave no clue as to how the map had come to be hidden there. Some believed it was the work of a traveling monk who had once lived in the desert and returned with this single precious piece of knowledge. Others whispered that the map had been stolen, smuggled north to keep it from falling into the hands of rulers who would exploit it. Whatever its journey, it had clearly been hidden with care, meant to survive centuries if necessary. The vellum itself was unlike other maps of its time, where most cartographers relied on charcoal and plant-based pigments. This one showed traces of crushed lapis for the rivers and coasts, and a rare ink that retained its depth after hundreds of years. The golden circle was the only anomaly, a material so expensive, so deliberately placed, it demanded explanation. When the monks examined it under lamplight, they noticed something stranger still. The gold was visible only at certain angles. Turn the map just so, and it would vanish entirely, leaving behind what looked like a blank space. Turn it again, and the circle would flare into being, as if it had been sleeping, and was now awake. This property set off a chain of speculation. Was the pigment treated to mimic the phenomenon of the city itself, visible only under precise conditions, or was it mere coincidence, the result of an artisan's technique? Some argued that the gold might respond to a particular kind of light, perhaps the same light that revealed the city each year. One monk, trained in astronomy, pointed out the 12-rayed star at its center. He believed it might represent a celestial alignment, a moment when the sun or moon struck the desert at an angle that caused some hidden structure to blaze with light. If that were true, the map was not simply a picture, it was a calendar, a key to timing the journey. Word of the map's discovery did not stay within the monastery walls. Merchants, scholars and explorers began to arrive, each offering donations to assist the library in exchange for a glimpse. Some copied the map by hand, though without the true gold pigment. Their versions lacked the strange vanishing glow. A few even claimed they could feel warmth radiating from the circle when they leaned close, a detail the monks neither confirmed nor denied. And then there was the matter of the missing context. The map showed no scale for the desert region, no known landmarks near the golden circle. It was as though the cartographer had drawn the world faithfully up to a point, and then at the edge of the unknown, had simply marked the city and left the rest blank. Perhaps he knew no more. Perhaps he knew but chose not to say. The mystery of the cartographer himself deepened the intrigue. The vellum bore no signature, no watermark, nothing to identify the maker. The style of the handwriting in other parts of the map suggested training in a European school of navigation, yet the materials hinted at Eastern sources. Theories bloomed: a runaway apprentice from Venice, a Moorish sailor turned monk, a scribe in service to both worlds. Whoever he was, he had placed the city, or the idea of it, at the heart of his work. For some, the map was proof enough that the shining city existed. For others, it was nothing but an elaborate flourish, perhaps commissioned by a wealthy patron with a taste for exotic legends. But one thing was certain: it reignited the search. Copies of the map traveled in locked chests across the Mediterranean. Explorers carried them deep into the sands, though none returned with photographs or sketches to match the gold circle. Still, the belief persisted. The idea had been given form, however fragile, however flawed, and once an idea has a shape, it is harder to kill. The monks, wary of the attention, eventually hid the original again, locking it in a chest that was said to be buried beneath the library floor. Whether it remains there or was later sold to a collector is unknown. What is known is that in the decades following the discovery, expeditions began to take a new shape, less random, more focused on aligning their journeys with the stars. For if the city could not be found by wandering blindly, perhaps it could be coaxed into revealing itself by learning the language of its light. The desert is an archive, but it is an archivist, with a strange temperament. It preserves with ruthless selectivity, saving what it wishes and letting the rest dissolve into dust. It will hold a clay jar for 2,000 years, untouched beneath a layer of sand, while a wooden cartwheel will vanish within a single season. It will keep a footprint for a week if no wind comes to erase it, or for 10,000 years if the sand hardens under heat and time before the wind arrives. If the shining city exists, or once existed, it is the desert that has decided how much of it survives. Archaeologists speak of Aeolian processes, the constant shaping and reshaping of landscapes by the wind. To live in the desert is to live in a place that is never the same twice. Dunes migrate. Valleys are filled. Rock faces are scoured clean. A doorway carved in stone can be erased by a century of storms until it is nothing more than a shadow in the cliffside. And yet, some things remain. In the Sahara, skeletons of whales rest far from any sea, their delicate bones preserved by the same arid air that bleaches them white. In the Arabian sands, entire villages have been found with walls still standing, their rooms filled with everyday objects left behind as if the people had stepped out and never returned. Sand, in its own way, is a kind of time machine, one that does not move you backward, but brings pieces of the past forward, placing them in your path when the wind decides to part the veil. The shining city's once-a-year appearance may owe itself to this same mechanism. Some geologists have suggested that shifts in wind patterns could briefly uncover a buried structure, perhaps the tops of walls or reflective stone facades, before covering them again. If the seasonal winds follow a stable pattern, the same structures could be revealed at roughly the same time each year. The glow, in this interpretation, would not be magical at all, but the simple work of sunlight striking exposed minerals. Minerals themselves can tell stories. Certain stones contain crystals that catch and scatter light in unusual ways. Quartz, mica, and feldspar, all common in desert environments, can create brilliant flashes when the sun is low on the horizon. In the right concentration, a wall built from such stone could appear to blaze as the light hits it at a perfect angle. From a distance, the effect could seem supernatural, especially if it was visible only in a short window before the sun's position shifted. But even science, with its careful language and patient measurements, cannot strip the mystery entirely. For such a structure to remain hidden the rest of the year, it would have to be buried deeply enough to escape detection, yet shallow enough for the winds to uncover it again without great effort. This is possible, indeed. History is full of such examples, but it requires a perfect balance of erosion and deposition. Too much sand, and the city would never be seen again. Too little, and it would be visible all year. There is also the matter of the desert's strange relationship with water. In certain places, rare rains can saturate layers of sand, causing them to harden temporarily into a reflective crust. When this crust dries and cracks, it can resemble worked stone, especially from a distance. It may even take on a sheen under moonlight, tricking the eye into seeing a wall or a street. Over time, this crust will crumble, but it may reform in the same places after another wet season, creating a kind of cyclical architecture that exists only in certain conditions. If such a crust formed over ruins, true ruins, built by human hands, the effect could be even more pronounced. The buried city would breathe in rhythm with the weather, appearing and disappearing as the sands shifted, like an artifact caught between two worlds. Archaeologists working in similar environments have learned to look for subtle clues, slight differences in vegetation, unusual color changes in the sand, the way the wind eddies around invisible obstacles. Sometimes these are the only hints that something lies below. In satellite imagery, buried walls can reveal themselves as faint, straight lines of discoloration, visible only when the light is right. The difficulty, of course, is that the right moment is rare. In a place where the horizon swallows detail, where the air itself can bend light into impossible shapes, knowing when and where to look becomes everything. This is why so many expeditions have failed. They arrive at the wrong time, under the wrong sky, and see only the blank face of the desert. And then there is the possibility, one that geologists hesitate to voice but cannot entirely dismiss, that the city's glow is not merely a reflection of sunlight, but the result of some chemical reaction between minerals and air, triggered by changes in temperature or humidity. Certain salts, when exposed to moisture, can produce a faint luminescence. Some rocks, heated all day and then suddenly cooled, can emit brief flashes of light as their crystalline structures release stored energy. These phenomena are rare, fleeting, and easily missed, but they do occur. For those inclined toward the mystical, these scientific possibilities are not threats to the legend, but companions to it. They suggest that the city's brilliance might be a natural miracle, one built into the bones of the earth itself, that its yearly return might be as inevitable as the tides, even if no one yet understands the mechanism. The desert remembers, but it remembers in fragments. It may keep the foundation of a wall, but scatter the rest of the building across a mile of dunes. It may preserve a single artifact, a cup, a blade, a shard of painted tile, while erasing all trace of the hands that made it. To reconstruct a lost city from such fragments is to read a story in which most of the pages have been torn out, and yet even a fragment can keep the whole alive in the mind. A single shard of glazed pottery can stand for an entire palace. A circle of gold on a map can stand for an empire. A flicker of light on the horizon can stand for a city that has been gone for centuries, or perhaps has never truly been gone at all. If the sands truly remember the shining city, then the next step is to ask what moment each year triggers that memory. What force aligns wind, light, and earth to make the invisible visible? For that we must look upward, away from the grains of sand at our feet and toward the vast clockwork of the sky. Every movement of sand, every shift of shadow, every shimmer of heat, is tied to the slow, precise turning of the heavens above. The sun's angle dictates the day's cruelty. The moon's pull, though faint here, still whispers to the air and the tides of far-off seas. For the nomads who first spoke of the shining city, and for the seekers who followed, the key to the mystery may never have lain in the ground at all, but in the endless clockwork overhead. In the stories passed through the generations, certain patterns emerge. The city is said to appear not just once a year, but always in the same season. Some accounts place it in the cool weeks after the longest nights, when winter loosens its grip. Others insist it comes when the air is heavy with the promise of summer, the sky a deep, unwavering blue. In every telling, however, there is a sense that the city's timing is not random, that it is bound to the same cycles that guide migrations, flowering, and harvests. Astronomers have long known that ancient civilizations used celestial alignments to mark sacred or significant events. The pyramids of Giza, are oriented to the cardinal points with uncanny precision. At Stonehenge, the rising sun at the summer solstice aligns perfectly with the heel stone, flooding the circle with light. In the desert itself, there are temples whose doorways are dark all year, except for one day, when the sun pierces their inner sanctuaries in a golden beam. It is not unreasonable to imagine that the shining city might be the product of similar thinking, a city designed from its very first stone, to come alive only when the heavens were in their appointed place. The 17th century map with its 12-rayed star offers a tantalizing clue: 12, the number of months, the number of major lunar cycles in a solar year, the number of signs in the zodiac. The rays could represent constellations marking a moment when one in particular hovers over the desert at just the right height to cast light in a way no other time can. If the city's walls were built from reflective stone or plated with metal, then even the faint light of a full moon could set them aglow under such an alignment. Ancient builders understood light in ways we are only beginning to rediscover. They knew how to catch the first rays of dawn and send them racing down narrow streets. They could arrange courtyards so that shadows would vanish entirely at a certain hour, as if the sun itself were pausing to rest. The desert, with its unbroken horizons, is an ideal canvas for such work, a place where the angle of the sun is pure, undistorted by mountains or forests. The city's annual glow could be a deliberate performance, an architectural calendar designed not to measure time for crops or taxes, but for something else entirely. What that purpose might have been is a question that divides scholars. Some believe it was religious, a moment when the gods were thought to walk among mortals, and the city became a beacon to welcome them. Others think it was practical, a signal to distant traders that the market was open, or to allied tribes that it was time to gather. A few whisper that it was neither, that the glow was meant to remind those who lived there of their place in the great turning order of things, not at the center, but as part of a cycle too vast to fully comprehend. Light, however, is not only the gift of the sun. The moon, too, has its moments of power. In certain conditions, its light can be focused to startling brightness, especially when the air is clear and dry. A city built to align with both lunar and solar cycles could, in theory, glow under either, or under the rare occasion when both lined up in harmony. And then there are the planets. Every so often, the wandering lights of Venus, Jupiter, or Mars take their places in the same slice of sky, shining brighter than any star. Venus, in particular, the morning and evening star, has been known to cast shadows in the desert when conditions are perfect. Imagine a city built with towers angled to catch that light, to send it spilling down its walls in silvery cascades. The effect would be brief but unforgettable. In this view, the city's glow is not a mystery to be solved, but a message, a conversation between earth and sky that repeats itself once a year, as faithful as a heartbeat. To see it is to stand in the center of that conversation, to feel the scale of the universe pressing gently around you. Modern science has begun to test these ideas. Astronomers and archaeologists have used computer models to rewind the heavens, simulating the positions of sun, moon, and stars over the desert for thousands of years. Certain alignments emerge, rare configurations where the sun sets at just the right angle to strike a particular patch of ground. When matched to the legends, some of these alignments occur with eerie precision, suggesting that the timing of the glow could indeed be written in the stars. But if this is true, it means the builders of the city possessed not only architectural skill, but astronomical mastery. They would have needed to track the heavens over decades, perhaps centuries, to predict the cycles. They would have needed to embed that knowledge into the city's very bones, ensuring that even as sand swallowed its streets, the glow would endure. And yet, there remains the possibility that the alignment is not deliberate at all. Nature itself creates marvels without human intervention. Shafts of light piercing canyon walls, reflections off salt flats, moonbows over waterfalls. Perhaps the city is nothing more than a ruin caught in such a natural alignment, its builders long gone, its glow an accident that just happens to keep perfect time. In either case, the effect is the same. Once a year, for reasons human or cosmic, the desert changes. The light becomes something more than light, and for those who are there to see it, the memory will live in them like a private star, rising again each time they close their eyes. For modern pilgrims, the knowledge of celestial timing adds a new dimension to the search. It is no longer enough to wander aimlessly, hoping to stumble upon the glow. One must wait for the right night, under the right sky, and be in the right place when the heavens lean close to touch the earth. The ancient seekers may have chased the city across the sand. The modern seeker must learn to chase the sky. There are no formal invitations, no banners, no ticketed entrances, no official program, only coordinates, traded in hushed conversations, sent in emails that vanish after being read, scribbled in the margins of notebooks like secret passwords. The place changes slightly from year to year, sometimes a hollow between dunes, sometimes a ridge that overlooks the horizon, but the purpose never does. They come in old jeeps, with dust in every seam, in buses rented by universities, in caravans of motorbikes that rattle with jerrycans of fuel. Some arrive alone, their entire kit carried in a single pack. Others come in groups, carrying telescopes, folding chairs and crates of provisions that will last only a night or two. In the daytime, it looks like nothing more than a loose scattering of camps across an empty expanse. A tent here, a van there, a solitary figure standing on a dune with binoculars, scanning the edge of the world. The sun is a merciless overseer in these hours, and the air hums with heat. People conserve their energy, retreating to the shade or lying flat to let the wind pass over them. But when the sun begins to fall, the desert changes. The shadows lengthen and deepen, draping the land in soft folds of blue and violet. Small fires appear, their light swallowed quickly by the vastness, their smoke curling up into a sky that has turned to velvet. From camp to camp, there are quiet greetings, a nod, a murmured word, between strangers who nonetheless know they share the same purpose. The seekers are not all alike. Some are scientists, with notebooks full of coordinates and weather data, convinced they will crack the conditions that create the glow. They speak in low tones about angular degrees, humidity levels, and mineral compositions. Others are artists, poets and photographers, drawn less by the possibility of an answer than by the certainty of beauty. For them the glow is a canvas that appears only once a year, and they have traveled far to stand before it. Then there are the mystics, the ones who believe the city is not merely a place, but a being. They speak of it as though it has moods, intentions, even a kind of awareness. To them arriving at the right moment is not about mathematics, but about being invited. Some bring offerings, small bowls of water, stones carried from their homelands, scraps of gold leaf that flutter in the wind before settling into the sand. Others bring nothing at all, believing the desert will give them what they need. As the evening deepens, conversations drift into shared stories. A woman from Morocco recalls seeing the glow once as a child, riding on the back of a camel with her father. A man from Australia speaks of saving for 10 years to make the journey, only to find clouds blotting out the stars the night he arrived. Laughter is rare, but not absent. There is a warmth in the knowledge that each person here has chosen to leave behind the familiar for a chance at the extraordinary. By the time the moon has risen, the camps are hushed. Most sit facing the same direction, toward the horizon where the glow is expected. The silence is not enforced, but it grows naturally, a shared act of listening, not for sound but for the subtle shift in the air that some claim comes before the city appears. Even the wind seems to lower its voice. This is the pilgrimage of shadows, hundreds of people scattered like seeds in the dark, their faces turned toward a moment that may or may not come. Some will leave at dawn, having seen nothing. Others will swear they caught a glimpse, a thin line of gold along the edge of the world, gone before they could blink. And for a few, the night will deliver exactly what they came for, the slow, impossible birth of light from sand. In the morning, They will pack their tents and scatter back into the world, carrying their stories with them. Some will return next year, others will not, but the desert will remember them, just as it remembers everything in its own way in its own time. And far away, in archives and journals, another chapter will be added to the long record of those who have sought the city and found only the space it left behind. By 1963, the world had grown smaller, in some ways, larger, in others. Satellites had begun to photograph the planet from above. Air travel had compressed weeks of travel into hours. Nations were mapping the ocean floor, splitting the atom, sending men into space. It seemed impossible that a city, even a hidden one, could remain beyond reach. But the desert still had places the modern world could not touch. That year, a man named Charles Airy Ashford decided it was time to settle the question. Ashford was not an archaeologist, nor a soldier, nor a mystic. He was an industrialist, a man who had made a fortune in post-war steel contracts, and had developed a late-in-life obsession with ancient architecture. Friends described him as meticulous, to the point of obsession, prone to vanishing into libraries for weeks, re-emerging with entire expeditions planned down to the hour. He had first read of the Shining City, in a slim, privately printed volume, on vanished civilizations of the Old World. The mention was brief, a footnote, referencing the 17th century gold-marked map, and a scattering of explorers' accounts. But it was enough. Ashford began collecting every scrap of writing on the subject, monastery records, desert folklore transcribed by colonial officers, satellite images that hinted at geometric shapes beneath the dunes. By the spring of 1963, he had assembled a team. It was an unusual mix: 2 geologists, an astronomer, a linguist fluent in multiple Arabic dialects, a cinematographer with experience in extreme climates, and a handful of Bedouin guides whose families had crossed the region for generations. Ashford spared no expense, shipping in custom desert vehicles, crates of non-perishable rations, specialized tents, designed to withstand sandstorms, and the most advanced cameras available at the time. The goal was simple: to be in the right place, at the right time, and to record the glow on film. The expedition left from a coastal city, under a white-hot sky, the vehicle's engines growling as they rolled into the interior. In the first days, morale was high. The desert was vast, but beautiful, the horizon drawn in perfect lines, the nights cool and filled with stars. Ashford would sit by the campfire each evening, unfolding the gold-marked map, and tracing their route by flashlight, the gold circle winking under the beam. On the 6th day, the air began to change. The guides spoke of a dryness, even they found unusual, a kind of stillness in the wind, that made sound carry farther than it should. It was then that the astronomer, Dr. Elaine Rowe, confirmed that their timing was nearly perfect. The sun and moon would align in a pattern she believed matched the conditions described in several old accounts. The city, if it was going to appear at all, would appear within 48 hours. The final camp was set on a ridge overlooking a shallow basin, the same location the guides said where their grandfathers had once seen the glow. The team tested their equipment, cleaned the camera lenses, and marked their positions with stakes so they could maintain a fixed frame. They slept in short shifts, each taking turns scanning the horizon through binoculars. On the first night, nothing happened. The desert lay still under a pale moon, the sand cold beneath their boots. A faint mist formed in the basin just before dawn, but it carried no light. The team returned to their tents, disappointed but not discouraged. On the second night, it began. Just after midnight, a subtle change swept the basin, not light exactly, but a thinning of shadow, as though the air had grown luminous. The cameras were readied, the film already rolling. Ashford himself stood behind one of the tripods, his breath clouding in the cold. Then, without warning, it was there. Not a single flare or beam, but a spreading glow, as if the ground itself had begun to breathe light. The basin's edges took on definition, and shapes rose from the haze: low walls, a broken tower, the suggestion of a street vanishing into the distance. The light was not steady, it shimmered faintly, as though viewed through water. For the briefest moment, the tower's surface flashed with something metallic. Voices whispered in the dark, the guides murmured prayers, the cinematographer adjusted focus, the camera whirring. Dr. Rowe, standing beside Ashford, repeated, "Extraordinary, extraordinary," under her breath. And then it changed. The light grew stronger, but the shapes began to blur, their edges dissolving. Some swore they saw figures moving between the walls, tall, indistinct, gliding without sound. The linguist, watching through field glasses, muttered that he could see carvings on the tower's face, though later he could not recall their shape. The air itself seemed to vibrate. A low hum felt more in the bones than in the ears. It lasted perhaps 4 minutes. Then, as quickly as it had come, it faded. The shapes collapsed back into shadow. The basin was once again empty sand. The team erupted into motion, checking the film, measuring the temperature, noting the time to the second. Ashford was smiling, his face lit by the campfire, as if he'd found the thing he'd been chasing. They celebrated quietly, certain they had captured undeniable proof. But when they returned to the coast and developed the film, something was wrong. The frames showed the ridge, the basin, the horizon, all exactly as expected. But in the critical minutes, the glow was faint, almost imperceptible. The shapes they had all seen with their eyes appeared only as distortions in the air, like heat haze. The metallic flash was absent. The more they looked, the more it seemed as if the camera had recorded a different night entirely. This was not a failure of exposure or focus. Other footage from the same reel shots of the camp, the stars overhead, was sharp and clear. Only the city resisted capture, as if it had chosen not to be preserved. Ashford refused to call it a failure. "We saw it," he told reporters, when word of the expedition leaked. "That is enough for now." But he never returned to the desert. The gold-marked map was later sold to a private collector. Dr. Rowe published a paper on light phenomena in arid basins, but avoided naming the location. The cinematographer moved on to other work, though he kept a still frame from that night pinned above his desk, a frame in which nothing visible appeared except for the faintest suggestion of a glow, if the light hit it just right. As for the guides, they said little. To them what happened in 1963 was not a surprise. The city had shown itself as it always did, and then withdrawn. The failure was not in the sighting, but in the attempt to make it permanent. The members of the 1963 expedition agreed on the moment. The basin, glowing shapes rising from the sand, the tower flashing with a metallic gleam. They described it in confident detail, and yet the film said otherwise. No towers, no carvings, barely a trace of the light they swore had been there. This is the space where human perception becomes a shifting desert of its own. The mind is not a perfect recorder. It is a painter, a composer, a storyteller, and it edits in real time. It smooths the rough edges of what we see, fills in gaps, heightens contrast, chooses which details to keep and which to let dissolve. The desert itself conspires in this. Heat bends light into ribbons, making distant objects waver and multiply. Layers of air at different temperatures bend the sun's rays so that something beyond the horizon can appear as if it hovers in the sky. A mountain can become a floating city. A sliver of sea can masquerade as a wall of gold. These mirages are not imaginary. They are real, light reaching your eyes, but rearranged into something that no longer matches the truth of the ground. And yet mirages fade when you approach. The shining city, at least in the accounts of those who claim to have stood inside it, does not. It remains, for its brief life, as solid as stone. You can walk its streets, you can touch its walls, you can leave footprints in its dust. If this is an illusion, it is one that behaves differently from any known trick of light. That difference may be why the memory of it clings so tightly. Memory and mirage share an important trait. Both are shaped by distance. The further away you get in space or in time, the more they rely on the mind to fill in what is missing. And the mind, as it turns out, is generous. It gives the tower an extra floor, It deepens the gold of the walls. It replaces gaps with certainty, until you are sure the thing you recall is exactly the thing that was. This is how legends persist. They are built not only from what is seen but from what is remembered, and memory does not need the camera's approval. A photograph can be dismissed as a trick of shadow, a fault in the lens, but the memory of standing in that glow, that is harder to erase. Even if the light was nothing more than air and angle, the way it felt to be there becomes its own truth. And so the desert keeps both versions, the one that exists in the eyes and the one that exists in the mind. They overlap, blur and fuse into a single story, retold until the line between perception and memory vanishes altogether. For the seeker, it raises an uncomfortable question. When you go to the desert to find the shining city, what are you really looking for? Is it the place itself, the stone, the street, the tower, or is it the story that will live in you afterward? And if the second is true, does it matter whether the first ever existed? Perhaps the shining city is like a mirage that has been adopted by memory, a light born in the air but kept alive in the mind, returning year after year, even if the desert never glows again. It begins often with the same image. A narrow street, paved in pale stone, walls the color of warm sand, yet faintly luminous, as though lit from within. Above, the sky is vast and low, holding the gold of a sun, neither rising nor setting. The air is still, and every sound, footsteps, a turning head, feels softened, wrapped in velvet. For some, the dream starts at the city's edge. They stand at a wide gate, its arch marked with symbols they cannot read. For others, it begins in the middle of a plaza, with no sense of how they arrived. But in every telling, there is the same strange awareness: this place exists, and I have been here before. The first record of such a dream, linked to the shining city, appears in a colonial-era journal from the late 1800s. A British officer, stationed hundreds of miles from the desert, wrote of a peculiar and vivid dream, in which he walked through a city of gold-tinged stone, whose streets ran toward a brightness on the horizon. He described feeling as though each turn was known to him, though he had never taken it before. The detail that troubled him most was that the air smelled faintly of salt, though no sea was visible. Decades later, a woman in Buenos Aires recorded a nearly identical dream in her diary: the same streets, the same golden light, the same faint salt in the air. She had never left South America. She had never read the officer's account. Such coincidences might be dismissed as chance, if they were rare. But the records are more numerous than one might expect. In letters, in oral histories, in psychiatric case notes, the same architecture appears, recurring in the minds of people separated by language, distance, and time. The proportions change slightly, the light shifts in hue, but the essence remains: a city that seems both remembered and new. Psychologists, who study shared dream imagery, offer possible explanations. Certain symbols, they say, are universal, archetypes embedded deep in the human mind. Cities of light, gates, towers, these appear in myths around the world, and may surface in dreams, without any external trigger. The shining city, then, could simply be a pattern the mind favors, a construction built from fragments of culture, expectation, and desire. And yet, not every detail fits that mold. The recurring salt scent, the plaza with 12 radiating streets, the way the horizon glows, as if the city is both origin and destination, these are not common dream symbols. Nor are they easily explained by cultural diffusion, given that some accounts come from isolated communities, with no recorded exposure to the desert legend. There is also the peculiar fact that some dreamers report waking with physical sensations: a light grit between their fingers, the faint warmth of stone under their palms, a lingering taste of dust. One man, a carpenter from Marseille, claimed that when he awoke from such a dream, the soles of his feet were faintly reddened, as if he had been walking barefoot across heated ground. Among the desert's nomadic tribes, such dreams are not considered strange. They speak of them as visitations, moments when the city chooses to show itself to someone, no matter where they are in the world. The person may never see the city while awake, but in sleep, they are invited to walk its streets. Sometimes this is seen as a gift, other times as a warning. The elders say that if you leave the city in your dream by the wrong gate, you will wander for the rest of your life, never feeling at home anywhere again. In the 20th century, as interest in the shining city spread beyond the desert, researchers began to collect these dream accounts more systematically. One of the most striking compilations came from Dr. Ania Kroll, a psychiatrist in Warsaw, who gathered 112 testimonies from patients across Europe. Without telling them the purpose of her study, she asked each to draw the place from their dreams. When the sketches were compared, more than half shared key features: a central plaza, a tall broken tower, streets oriented in a pattern suggestive of a compass rose. Several included the same 12-rayed motif found on the gold-marked map. What to make of such convergence? Skeptics argue that humans are prone to pattern making, that once an idea is seeded, even unconsciously, it can ripple through populations. Believers counter that such precision across unconnected dreamers is too sharp to be explained away. They suggest that the city exists, not only in the physical world, but also in what one mystic described as the deep river that all minds drink from in sleep. The idea is not as unscientific as it sounds. Neurologists acknowledge that dreams are shaped by the brain's ability to merge sensory fragments, memory and imagination into coherent, if illogical, narratives. What remains unexplained is how unrelated people can share elements so specific that they could almost be coordinates, and so the dream accounts continue flowing in from distant places. A fisherman in Sri Lanka dreams of walking through a silent market, where the stalls are empty, but the awnings ripple, as if in a breeze. A young woman in Iceland dreams of following a cat through narrow glowing alleys, until it disappears under a gate shaped like an arch of flame. A retired teacher in Kenya dreams of standing on a tower, looking out over endless dunes, as a sound like low distant singing rises from below. Some who dream of the city once return to it in sleep, finding new streets, new details, the layout building in their minds like a map slowly unfolding. Others see it only once but carry it for the rest of their lives, a place both real and unreachable. If the city appears in dreams as it appears in the desert, only briefly, only under certain conditions, then perhaps the two are connected in ways we do not yet understand. Perhaps the annual glow in the sand is only one manifestation, and the dreams are another, both windows into the same hidden place. Or perhaps it is simpler still: the city exists where memory, longing and imagination overlap, and dreams are the one place where those three can meet without resistance. If the shining city exists only in mirage and memory, it leaves nothing behind. If it is real, if its stones are more than light and dream, then it must somewhere have bones in the earth. In recent decades, archaeologists have scoured the desert for those bones, not by wandering blindly, but by using tools the early seekers could never have imagined. Satellite imagery that can read subtle shifts in surface color, ground-penetrating radar, capable of mapping what lies meters below the sand, drones that can scan a valley in minutes, and yet, what they find is never the city itself. Instead, they find fragments, pieces of something larger, scattered like the remnants of a long-forgotten language. One such fragment came to light in 1987, when a team surveying for ancient caravan routes unearthed a shard of pottery, unlike any they had seen in the region. It was glazed in a thin pearlescent film that caught the sunlight in gold tones, even though no gold was present in its composition. Chemical analysis revealed a mixture of minerals uncommon in local clay, suggesting it had been imported or traded from hundreds of kilometers away. The glaze's refractive quality was so unusual that one researcher half-jokingly called it a piece of the glow. A year later, another team, working nearly 300 kilometers to the west, discovered the base of what might once have been a column. The stone was flecked with mica, and tiny quartz inclusions, giving it a faint sparkle even under the midday sun. The column's shape was unlike the classical or Islamic forms common in the region, hinting at an architectural style with no clear lineage. It had been buried beneath a meter of compacted sand, its surface smoothed as if by centuries of wind, yet still bearing faint parallel grooves along its side. In 2004, perhaps the most debated find emerged. A group of desert preservation volunteers stumbled upon a cluster of worked stones, arranged in a shallow crescent, each coated in a thin layer of crystallized salt. At first, this seemed unremarkable, until they noticed that the stones faced precisely toward the point on the horizon, where the sun would rise during the rare alignment described by astronomers studying the city's timing. The salt layer was not from seawater, as might be expected, but from subterranean deposits that had leached upward, leaving a pale, luminous sheen. At sunset, the stones caught the light in a way that made their edges seem to glow. Some scholars hailed it as the first true trace of the city's design. Others dismissed it as a coincidence, the natural result of geology, not human intention. And so the pattern continued, each discovery a whisper rather than a proclamation, a carved stone fragment with no matching ruins, a ceramic bead with a faint 12-rayed motif, a slab of sandstone that bore the outline of what could have been an engraving now worn nearly smooth. One artifact, in particular, has fueled both fascination and skepticism, a bronze disc about the size of a dinner plate, recovered in 2012 from a dune collapse. Its surface is engraved with intersecting lines that, when traced, form a pattern remarkably similar to the starburst symbol on the gold-marked map. The metal had oxidized into deep greens and browns, but flecks of a golden alloy clung stubbornly in the engraved grooves. Metallurgical analysis suggested the gold was not decorative but functional, possibly to reflect light. Some proposed the disc was once mounted atop a staff or tower, catching the sun's rays in a deliberate display. Others suspect it may have been part of a navigational instrument, or even a ceremonial mirror. The problem, as always, is context. Without surrounding structures, without a clear layer of occupation, each relic remains untethered. Isolated finds can be explained away, traded goods, random deposits, fragments carried by wind or water from somewhere else entirely. Archaeology demands patterns, multiple lines of evidence converging in one place. The desert, in its stubbornness, offers only single points scattered over vast distances. This has led to an ongoing debate in the academic community. Some argue that the Shining City, if it existed, may have been less a single permanent settlement, and more a kind of seasonal complex, built in light materials, that vanished quickly, leaving only the most durable or ceremonial elements. In this view, the city's glow was a yearly event tied to these structures, but the rest of the year the site may have looked like any other stretch of desert. Over centuries, sand buried the heavy pieces, erasing the seasonal camps entirely. Others cling to the vision of a permanent city, swallowed whole by the dunes, its walls, streets and plazas preserved beneath the surface, waiting for the wind to strip them bare. In their minds, the relics we find are simply the loose bones washed free before the skeleton itself is revealed. There are also those who take a more mystical interpretation, that the city is not fixed in space but moves or even shifts between worlds. In this view, the relics are like seashells found far from the ocean, proof that the tide has touched here, but not necessarily where the water now lies. For the modern seeker, each relic serves a double purpose. It is evidence, yes, but it is also a promise. A shard of pottery that holds the desert's light like a captive ember suggests there may be more beneath the sand. A disc engraved with a golden starburst hints at deliberate alignment with the heavens. A column flecked with quartz invites the imagination to rebuild the city around it, tower by shimmering tower. Yet, with each find, the mystery grows more stubborn. The relics tell us that something was here, but not what, not when, and not why. They are like scattered syllables of a language we can hear, but not yet speak. And so the search continues, in the dunes, in the archives, in the restless mind of every person who has looked at a glowing horizon and wondered. The desert will not give up its story easily, but now we know it keeps at least some of it in the earth. And soon, we will step into the moment itself, the brief golden hour, when the city comes alive, and the relics scattered through the desert are no longer fragments, but parts of a whole. It begins quietly. The desert at dusk is already a place of soft miracles, the air cooling with each breath, the sky dissolving from blue to violet, the horizon sharpening as the heat haze lifts. But tonight, the stillness feels heavier, as if the dunes themselves are holding their breath. You stand at the crest of a ridge. Behind you the camps have gone silent. Even the occasional murmur from the seekers has faded, replaced by a collective listening, not for a sound, but for that subtle change in the air that some swear comes before the glow. The sun is low, sliding toward the horizon in a slow, inevitable arc. Its light has deepened from gold to copper, throwing long shadows into the hollows between the dunes. You can see the basin ahead, flat and empty, its sand a pale grey under the evening sky. Nothing moves, nothing shines. And then it happens. At first it's just a trick of contrast, a brightness along the basin's far edge, as if a cloud had shifted to let the sun through. But there are no clouds tonight, only the clean, unbroken sky. The brightness deepens, gaining shape. The sand begins to shimmer, not as a surface, but as though light is rising from within it. The glow spreads like a tide. Lines sharpen in the haze, the suggestion of walls, low at first, then taller, their edges catching fire in the sunlight. A street takes form, straight and deliberate, running from the heart of the basin toward the place where you stand. Its surface gleams as if polished. To the right, an angular shadow resolves into a broken tower, its upper third missing, yet still holding a proud, stubborn posture. The air changes. It feels warmer, though the sun is sinking. The smell shifts too, faintly metallic, like hot stone after rain. The light is not the harsh blaze of noon, but a gentler radiance that seems to belong to the city itself. It does not spill outward, it gathers you in. People around you are leaning forward, as if proximity could make the moment last longer. Some whisper, others stand utterly still, their hands hanging loose at their sides. The glow has a strange pull. You find yourself wanting to step into it, to see if the streets will accept your weight. From this distance, the city is both clear and impossible. The walls are there, and yet they seem thinner than they should be, as if made from a material caught between solid and air. The tower's surfaces flash now and then, as though something reflective is embedded in their stone. Small shapes move in the light, not quite people, not quite shadow, passing between buildings that might be ruins, or might be whole, and then comes the moment that always breaks the witnesses. The last curve of the sun touches the horizon, and the light shifts from gold to something richer, molten, liquid, pouring itself across the city's surfaces. Every edge glows, every wall seems alive. For a heartbeat, the basin is a chalice filled to the brim with light, and you feel that if you blink, you might spill it. Time loses its usual texture here. Seconds stretch into minutes, or perhaps minutes shrink to seconds. It's impossible to tell. All that matters is the glow, and the sense that the city is watching you as much as you are watching it. Then, as gently as it arrived, it begins to fade. The molten light cools to gold, the gold to amber, the amber to grey. The walls lose their edges, melting back into the air. The street shimmers once more, then is gone. The tower holds on a moment longer, its outline trembling like a candle's flame in wind, and then it too dissolves. In the stillness that follows, the basin is just a basin again. Sand, shadow, the faint hiss of wind curling over the ridge. You are aware of your breath, of the way your heart feels as though it's slowing to match the pace of the dunes. No one speaks at first. Then, quietly, the murmurs begin. Soft laughter from relief, the rustle of clothing as people turn away. the low, almost private exchanges of those who have just shared something that cannot quite be explained. Some take photographs, though the older ones shake their heads, already knowing the images will not capture what was seen. The glow is over, but its after-image lingers in the mind, not as a static picture, but as a pulse. You feel it behind your eyes when you close them. You sense it still on your skin, as if the light had weight and you are carrying it now, just as those before you carried it away from this place, and just as those who come after will carry it again. Some will leave tonight, driving back towards cities of neon and glass, content to have witnessed the rarest thing they may ever see. Others will stay, camping in the cool dark, hoping despite all reason that the city might return for them before the next year's turn. The desert offers no promise. It gives the glow, and then it takes it back, leaving you with only the silence, the sand, and the certainty that for a few minutes something ancient and extraordinary stood before you. And in the morning, when the wind begins to move again, the basin will be empty, but you will know where it was, you will know what you saw, and you will spend the rest of your life wondering whether it will ever let you see it again. When the glow dies, it does not go all at once. It slips away in fragments, like the last notes of a song drifting into silence. The tower's shimmer is the first to weaken, then the edge of the main street, then the farthest walls, until only a faint blush of light clings to the basin floor, and then even that is gone. In that moment, the air feels strangely hollow. It is not darker than it was a few minutes ago, but it feels darker, as though something has been subtracted from the night. The sound of the wind seems louder now, filling the space where the city's presence had been. For a long heartbeat, no one moves. Those who have been standing remain frozen, eyes fixed on the horizon, as if refusing to accept that the sight is over. Others sink into the sand, their knees folding under them, the stillness of their posture betraying a kind of quiet awe. Even the most skeptical among them, the scientists, the seasoned travelers, are slow to look away. Then slowly, the spell begins to break. A cough, the creak of a camera tripod being lowered, the shuffle of boots in sand. Conversations restart in whispers, the sound cautious, as if speaking too loudly might erase the memory entirely. Some reach for notebooks, desperate to capture every detail before it fades from their minds. Others stand with their hands at their sides, choosing to keep the memory unpinned, free from the distortion of words. There is an unspoken understanding among those who have seen it. You do not speak of the city too soon. The moment is too raw, too fragile. It must be carried in silence for a while, like an ember in the palm, before it can be shared. The desert has given something precious, and to rush to tell it would feel like a betrayal. Some people stay behind, after the rest have drifted back toward camp. They linger at the ridge, or the basin's edge, scanning for any sign that the light might return. A few claim that if you stay long enough, you can still see traces, faint ripples in the air, as if the city's outline is hiding just beyond the visible spectrum. Most see nothing, but even that absence feels like part of the ritual, a final acknowledgement that the city has decided to go. The emotional aftermath takes different shapes. For some it is joy, a deep private elation, that they have stood in the right place at the right time, and witnessed something most will never see. For others it is longing, a hollow ache, not unlike the ache of saying goodbye to a dear friend, knowing you cannot follow them where they've gone. And for a few, it is frustration, almost anger. They wanted answers, proof, something they could hold in their hands, and the city has left them with nothing but light burned into memory. Photographs, if taken, offer little comfort. In most the glow is muted, the shapes indistinct, the magic gone. To someone who wasn't there, it looks like nothing more than sunlight on dust. This is why so many witnesses stop trying to prove it. The city does not seem to want to be caught. There is a kind of reverence in that. The desert keeps its treasure by making it unstealable. The only way to possess it is to have been there, to have felt the warmth in the air, to have stood in the gold before it slipped away. No one can take that from you, but neither can you pass it on in any form that will make someone else understand. As the night deepens, the camps stir with the small sounds of departure. Some seekers pack quickly, their faces unreadable in the lamplight. Others linger for one more pot of tea, one more quiet conversation under the stars. A few make plans to return next year, marking the date in their calendars with a small secret symbol. By morning the place will be empty, the ridge will show no footprints, the basin no trace of streets or walls. Even the air will feel different, as though the city's brief presence had changed its texture, and then smoothed it flat again. Those who leave carry the glow with them, each in their own way. Some keep it as a private talisman, never speaking of it outside trusted circles. Others tell the story again and again, knowing it will sound unbelievable, but needing to keep it alive in the telling. The scientists file reports that dance carefully between description and speculation. The poets and dreamers write verses that only hint at what they saw, and every one of them knows the truth. No matter how carefully you prepare, no matter how long you wait, you cannot summon the city. You can only be there when it chooses to appear, and you can only watch as it chooses to vanish. In that vanishing lies the essence of its hold over the human heart. If the city could be visited any day, it would lose its magic. If its streets could be mapped and photographed, it would become another entry in a travel guide. But because it leaves, because it withdraws completely, it becomes eternal in the mind, untouchable, incorruptible. The desert knows this, and so year after year, it repeats the ritual, giving the glow, taking it away, and leaving behind only the silence where it once stood. There is a moment in every great mystery when the evidence lies before you like the pieces of a puzzle. And yet, even when you try to fit them together, more than one picture emerges for the shining city. Those pictures take very different forms. The first, and perhaps most widely accepted among the cautious, is the scientific explanation. According to this view, the glow is an optical effect, a product of the desert's unique interplay of light, heat, and reflective minerals. Quartz and mica are both found in abundance here, and when exposed at the right angle, they can scatter light so intensely that it looks as though the ground itself is shining. If those minerals are embedded in ancient masonry or layered in the surface crust of the basin, then a fleeting city-like shape might appear when sunlight or moonlight strikes from just the right position. Under this lens, there is no magic. The annual recurrence is tied to celestial cycles, yes, but only in the sense that the Earth's tilt and the Sun's path create repeating angles of light. A geologist might tell you that the city is nothing more than a mirage amplified by geology, an illusion without malice or intention, beautiful precisely because it is rare, and yet this tidy explanation falters in the face of certain facts. It cannot account for the sense of solidity described by those who have walked into the glow, nor does it easily explain why so many photographs and films fail to capture what the human eye sees. It sidesteps the question of the relics, the glazed pottery, the mica-flecked columns, the engraved bronze disc, which suggest that something once stood here that was more than sand and light. The second picture belongs to the historians and archaeologists who believe in a lost city buried by the dunes. To them, the glow is the sun, or the moon briefly uncovering what lies beneath. The basin may hold the remains of a settlement that once flourished along a now vanished trade route, its walls faced with reflective stone or painted with mineral-rich plaster. Over centuries, sandstorms buried it, leaving only the tallest or most exposed elements to catch the light at certain times of year. In this view, the shining city is real, not in the sense of a phantom, but as an archaeological site waiting to be fully uncovered. The gold-marked map, the recurring 12-rayed motif, the salt-coated stones aligned to the horizon, these are not coincidences, but clues. The annual appearance is simply the brief moment when shifting sands and a specific angle of light combine to reveal its outlines. This theory offers something tangible, the possibility that careful excavation could one day bring the city back into permanent view. But it too has its gaps. If the ruins are fixed in place, why have expeditions not managed to map them precisely over multiple sightings? And if the city's bones are there all year, hidden just beneath the surface, why have ground-penetrating radar surveys returned only scattered anomalies rather than a continuous structure? Then there is the third picture, the one painted by myth, mysticism, and the nomads who have walked these sands for generations. In their telling, the city is not fixed at all. It moves, or perhaps it exists in a place where the boundaries between worlds are thinner. Once a year, those boundaries align, and the city steps briefly into our sight. In this view, the relics found in the desert are not remnants of the city's permanent presence, but traces left behind when it departs, like a traveler forgetting a scarf. The mystics speak of the city as sentient in some way, choosing who may see it. They point to the dream accounts as proof, people thousands of miles apart visiting the same streets in sleep some years before they ever hear of the legend. To them, the glow is not an accident of physics, but an act of will. The city shows itself not because of where the sun is, but because of where you are, in mind, in spirit, in readiness. Modern science balks at this, but there is a strange practicality to the belief. If the city chooses its witnesses, then no amount of technology will guarantee a sighting. You go not to find the city, but to be found by it. And then, of course, there is a fourth picture, one that is neither purely science, nor history, nor mysticism, but a merging of all three. In this version, the shining city was once entirely real, a constructed place of stone, metal, and careful celestial alignment. Over centuries, the physical city fell to ruin, but the combination of its reflective materials, its orientation to the sun and moon, and the shifting nature of the desert preserved its presence in a strange half-life. What remains now is part ruin, part natural light phenomenon, and part projection of the human mind, a place that is half in the earth and half in memory. The relics are from the real city, the glow is from the minerals, and the light, the sense of being chosen, comes from the deep human instinct to assign meaning to rare, beautiful experiences. Each explanation has its defenders, and each has its critics. None can claim final victory over the others, because the city itself refuses to give up enough evidence for certainty. This is perhaps its most enduring trait. It allows every seeker to leave with their own version of the truth. For some, that truth is in the data, measurements of light intensity, temperature gradients, mineral samples. For others, it is in the story, the way the glow felt, the way it seemed to look back at you. For still others, it is in the pattern, the belief that the city appears as part of a cycle, a rhythm older than human history, one that will continue long after we are gone. And so, the shining city sits at the crossroads of fact and faith. It does not insist on being one or the other. It is content to be both, or neither, depending on who is telling the story. It can be a mirage to the skeptic, a ruin to the archaeologist, a vision to the mystic, and a memory to the dreamer, all at once. In the end, the city may not care what we believe. The desert certainly doesn't. Each year, when the time comes, the glow will return. Whether anyone is there to see it or not, it will spread across the basin, ignite the tower, turn the sand into liquid gold, and then withdraw, leaving the world exactly as it was. And perhaps that is the truest thing about it. The shining city is not meant to be possessed, it is meant to be encountered. It is meant to remind us that some things are not ours to keep, only to witness, and to carry in memory, until we are gone and someone else stands in our place, waiting for the light. Night has returned to the basin. The glow is gone. The camps have gone dark. The wind moves again, shaping the edges of the dunes, smoothing away the footprints of those who came to watch. By morning, the ridge will look as though no one stood there at all. This is the way the desert works. It is not hostile, but it is not generous either. It offers moments, brief, brilliant, unforgettable, and then it erases them with the same patient hand that has been at work for millennia. What remains is not what the desert chooses to keep in its sands, but what it allows to remain in us. Some leave the shining city, certain of what they saw, ready to defend their version of it against all others. Some leave unsure whether they saw it at all, the glow already fading in their minds like the tale of a dream. And some leave with no need for certainty, content to have been there in the right place, at the right time, in the presence of something they cannot name. It is tempting to think of the city as a question that waits for an answer, that one day, with enough technology, enough digging, enough patience, we will solve it. We will pin it to a map, photograph it from every angle, measure its streets, catalogue its artifacts, and finally place it in the ledger of human history. But maybe that is not what it is for. Maybe the shining city exists to resist being solved. Maybe its gift is not knowledge, but the space it leaves for wonder. The part of the mind that leans toward the horizon, that waits in the stillness for the first hint of gold, is the part that keeps us looking at the desert, at the sky, at all the mysteries that lie just beyond the edge of proof. The desert understands something we often forget, that not every treasure is meant to be owned, but the value of some things lies entirely in their impermanence, that beauty and truth can exist without being held in the hand, and so the city comes and goes. It appears briefly under the watch of those who have made the journey. It shines in a way that is impossible to capture completely. It withdraws, leaving only the basin, the sand, the wind. It waits for the earth and the sky to align again. It does this without urgency, without the need to be remembered, without concern for what we think it is. Perhaps it will still be doing this 1,000 years from now, long after our names are dust. Perhaps the people who gather then will tell different stories about it, or maybe they will tell the same ones, not realizing how old they are. Perhaps the city will look different, or appear in another place entirely, or stop appearing altogether. The desert offers no promises, and yet you can almost feel it, the certainty that somewhere, even now, the city exists. Not in a way that can be reached, but in a way that can be waited for. The gold is still there, folded into the sand, hidden in the angles of stone and mineral. The timing is still locked in the slow turning of the earth beneath the sky. The moment is still on its way. Until then the city belongs to no one. It belongs to the wind that shapes its streets, to the sand that buries and unveils it, to the light that makes it real for a breath and then takes it away. It belongs to the stories that move through the desert like travelers themselves, carried in the voices of nomads, the journals of explorers, the dreams of strangers half a world away. And it belongs to the silence, that same deep, unbroken silence that stretches across the dunes when the glow is gone, when the last watcher has left, when the desert is alone again under its vast cold sky. This is the truth the desert keeps. The city's secret is not in how it appears, but in how it disappears. Not in what it shows, but in what it withholds. It teaches, in its own wordless way, that not everything can be grasped, and that some things are more beautiful for it. You turn away from the basin at last. The night is wide and empty. Somewhere, a star falls, burning a brief line into the dark before fading from sight. The air smells of cool sand. Your footsteps make no sound. The desert accepts them, then begins its slow work of erasing them, as it has erased all who came before. Behind you the city sleeps again. Ahead, the horizon is endless,